one of the things that tends to happen, we make decisions and we might make a bad decision.
Right.
Or something that we feel is a bad decision, something that's cost us. What can we do to recover? Is there anything that you know about that can help us to recover from making mistakes?
Absolutely. And so when we're talking about mistakes, I think a lot of people don't make progress in their life because of the fear of judgment, the fear of looking bad. A lot of people won't go to that exercise at the gym because they're brand new. And I think that's something that's very important to get over. And I'll talk about first, a lot of people won't make mistakes to begin with, but mistakes are just a sign that we're trying something, right? It's similar to a child who's learning how to walk. You wouldn't see your child stumble a few times and just be like, okay, don't try this anymore. You're looking really bad. Don't walk. Walking's not for you. But as we grow older, sometimes we're so concerned about other people's opinions and expectations. So I know a lot of your listeners take notes. I would write this down and just put it by your computer or something. It's just, you can go broke buying into the opinions and expectations of other people. And when I was working, I help a lot of actors speed read scripts, have focus on set, memorize their lines faster. And I remember when I was working with Jim Kwik, and we were making guacamole, of all things, in his kitchen, which is a great brain food. By the way, what you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. So we're making this, and I'm asking him the same question I ask a lot of people, like, why do you do what you do? I'm very interested in human motivation because that's a thinking process. And I find out that the reason why he acts so insane, if you will, or extreme on set is because he wants to give everybody who's watching permission to be themselves. And I feel like, and he calls it freeing people from the concern of others. That's quote unquote his religion, freeing other people from the concern of other people. Yeah. And I feel like constantly we're mitigating ourselves, our way we can express ourselves, because we're scared of how we're going to look. We're scared of, of judgment, and what critics are going to say. But the critics, that's the easiest job in the world, because all they do is they don't have to do anything. They can just criticize other people who are trying to do things. Right. So my first comment on when it comes to mistakes is, you've all heard this before, but in order to learn, you have to make mistakes. That's how we learn, because there's no such thing as failure. People think failure is the opposite of success. But I feel like, in you and I, the people that we get to spend time with and we get to interview for our shows and such, and our personal experience, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success, right? And I feel like there's no such thing as failure. There's only failure to learn, because if you're getting feedback, then you know what to do different. And I just did a podcast episode with Beth Comstock, who's the former vice chair of General Electric, which is all about imagination. And she has a new book called Imagine It Forward, and the Power of Imagination. And we're talking about, Edison, who started General Electric, and he was a great marketer. But obviously, you've all heard that he was like, oh, I didn't fail thousands of times to make the light bulb. I succeeded in learning what not to do, right? And so it's a mindset. So I would say first start with making more mistakes and fail forward and give yourself permission. But the big thing is, how do you recover from a mistake? And I would give everyone, I like acronyms, this because we've talked about this in other shows on how to remember names and speed read. I use acronyms. What I would say is put the mistake behind you and make it old. And so the acronym is O.L.D. I want everyone to think about a mistake that they are holding on to, because I think a lot of us have regret and they live in the past. But I always tell people, if you're living in the past, then you're dying in the present, because you're always looking in that rear view mirror, and then you can't be here, right? And so you can learn from the past, but you got to live for today, and then you could lead your legacy tomorrow. And so remember old. And so the O in someone, as everyone right now, will make this interactive, because we don't want to make this theoretical. You make it relevant to you. Think about a mistake you're holding on to. You want to make it old. The O is, you need to own it. You need to own that. And here's a few things that will allow you to own it. The A is, you need to be accountable for it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few A's. And here's the first A. Be accountable for it, because you need to take responsibility for it. You and I have talked about the time I've spent with Stan Lee, the co-creator of all these amazing Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers. And, and he told me in the car, one day, he was like, "Who's your favorite superhero?" I was like, "Spider-Man." He's like, "With great power comes great responsibility." And in my mind, because I had my learning difficulties, I reversed things. I was like, "Stan, you're right. But the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility for something, even our mistakes, we have great power to make things better." And so first thing is you to become accountable for it. Another A is just acknowledge that you're human. Acknowledge that it is a mistake and that you made it, because some people deny they deny that they made that mistake, and that's a challenge also as well. So you need to be able to acknowledge it in order to be able to, because some people, what you resist persists and they fight with it and they try to defend it. But if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And so just acknowledge it. Another A is apologize. Apologize if you've hurt somebody. If this mistake costs somebody else outside of you, apologize to that person. You can keep it brief, but be clear. Yeah. And apologize in a way that is sincere, obviously.
Mean it.
Exactly. Yeah. Because people, we all have this radar. We know if something's sincere or not, but apologize for it, because that's a way of owning it. You apologize for it, explain if you need to why it happened, and explain how it's never gonna, happen again, if you will.
And if you really mean it, you're not expecting the other person to necessarily do anything differently. It's you're apologizing for yourself.
Absolutely.
And the potential for healing.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. So you're accountable for it, right? And you acknowledge it, you apologize for it, and maybe you need to apologize to yourself also, because forgiveness goes a long way. I've spent a lot of time on, especially with my brain injury, through going through SPECT scans, having my brain analyzed, neurofeedback. And one of the best ways to get into those deep healing states, the number one way that I found from personal experience is forgiveness. And studies done in self-compassion say that when you don't beat yourself up, because a lot of people, they are really hard on themselves. They ate that cupcake, right? Or they didn't work out that day, or they were a little short with their child or whatever it is. And they beat themselves up. And we find in the studies that actually kindness goes farther. When you're kind to yourself, meaning that, you say, I'm human. I had a long day and I did make a mistake, but you're kind with yourself as opposed to beating yourself up, you're more likely to follow through in the future. So the O in O.L.D is you make the mistake old, is you own it. Yeah. You're accountable, you acknowledge it, you apologize for it. The L in O.L.D stands for, of course, learn from it. Right? And like the whole idea behind making mistakes is that where's the gift in this? And I ask that myself all the time when there's a mistake that's made either by myself or somebody around me, is like, where's the gift? And usually the gift comes from a new distinction that you have or a new learning. And so when I'm doing this and I'm making a mistake and I've made a mistake, what I'll do is I'll even journal about it a little bit, because I was like, what was my intention here? What was the environment that allowed this mistake to happen? Was I multitasking? Was I taking too much, taking on too much? Was I exhausted and I didn't sleep the night before? Like what created this environment for this mistake to happen? Or did I not have enough information, right? And so I think that reflection is very important, because otherwise what happens is you don't handle the D, which so the O again is you own it. The L is you learn from it. And a big part of it for me is I journal about it, because I like to write about it and reflect on it. Otherwise there's no learning from it. And then the D stands for don't repeat it. Don't repeat it. Because if you truly learned from it, then you're not going to repeat it, because the first time you did, it's a mistake. But the second time you do it, it's a choice. Yeah. Because a lot of people, they say, and you've heard this phrase in self-improvement forever, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And, I don't know if that's insanity. Maybe it's just a poor memory because you don't remember the lesson that came from it. And I feel like a lot of people repeat mistakes, and the D again says, don't repeat it, because they don't remember the lesson or the pain that came. So they end up dating the same kind of person. Yeah. Right? They say they make the same kind of mistake with their health over and over again, or they hire the same person, or they again, wait and procrastinate on their taxes, or whatever those things are. And in order to not repeat it, I would say a few things. maybe I'll make them, I like iteration, maybe a few P's. And I did a whole episode on this that went deep in it about making mistakes. P is like prepare next time. When you learn it, and you journal about it, you prepare for the next time. I would say plan. When you know something, this situation could come up in the future, plan ahead. And that would prevent you from making that kind of mistake, because these thought experiments, using your imagination to project into the future, and really imagination is really rehearsal. When somebody is fearful that they're going to make a mistake, whether it's public speaking, and this, like a lot of people, one of the big fears is people, when you and I go to events, even people don't know, like backstage, a lot of our peers are really scared to go out stage and do their work, but they're so mission driven, they have a moral obligation to do it, so that's the motivation. But preparation is just a signal to your mind. Fear is just meaning you need to prepare more. And so I would say the D is don't repeat it, because if you really did own it, if you really do own it and you really did learn from it, then don't repeat that, because then it's a choice.
Jim, this is so powerful because people, even you asking me about, what have I done to get to the place that I'm at personally?
Exactly.
And it's literally like this formula that you just mentioned. I'm very, very big on learning from my mistakes. I'm very, very passionate about it. But it starts with owning it and saying, this is my responsibility. This is my bad. Even if it's not directly like you did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you were involved and you put something in position, or you made the choice to be involved in something, taking responsibility for whatever you can, because it gives you the opportunity to actually learn from it then. And so learning from it, and then don't repeat it, because man, like I want that lesson, because you better believe, like, I've got this one. I'm not going to do that again.
Exactly.
So just like I cut the cord, and so if people can start to embrace this, and this, I love this, so powerful, this acronym of O.L.D. And man, it's like, it is old, we got to let this stuff go.
Put in the past.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing when it comes to mistakes, is when I was talking about forgiveness, is just, you are not your mistakes. Your mistakes don't define you, but how you deal with those mistakes can define you. And I'm saying that using this model of O.L.D, and again, going back to thinking, because this conversation has been all about thinking, I wish they taught this back in school, because this is our ability to make mistakes and to grow through mistakes. I feel like when we do these things also, it increases our integrity with other people, because they see we own it, that we learn from it, and we don't repeat it.
Right.
And I love what you said about how it falls on your shoulder, that even if somebody on your team did something, ultimately you had a part in it, because maybe you hired that person, or it was a manage, and you take responsibility.
Gave them the job,
and we could appreciate,
or the task.
And we always appreciate leaders who do that, because we are forgiving when we see somebody is growing from their mistakes, and they're not putting it on somebody else and making somebody else blaming and all that other stuff. And we stay in our power. And yes, there could be some short-term pain, like there is doing a lot of any kind of growth. But I think that even, if you do the easy thing, which is procrastinate and put it off and not take responsibility, then life gets really hard.
Absolutely.
But if you do the hard things and you own it and you apologize for it and you do everything you can to make it better and learn from it, then life gets a lot easier.
Definitely. I want to ask you about one more thing.
Yes.
There's so many things I could talk to you about.
Dude, I'm honored to be here.
I'm just thinking about some of the biggest issues that we tend to have as humans, but also as people, especially the Model Health Show community. People who are involved in this mission and this movement are really growth driven. Like, we want to be the best us possible. We want to have the health that we truly want. We want to have the relationships. We want to have the careers that we want. But a big barrier for that is it's oftentimes not the environment, it's ourselves. We are our biggest trap door, right? This self-sabotage. We set ourselves up for failure. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of self-sabotage and any kind of insights you can offer to people to kind of move past that?
Completely. I mean, this comes down to, again, how we think about things and how we think about ourselves and how we think about our behaviors. And I'll give somebody who's listening this, I think everyone can relate to taking one step forward towards a goal and then taking 2 steps back, right? Why do we do things that could harm ourselves in the long term? Or we procrastinate. We know we need to do something, but we put it off and we don't have the discipline. And I'll give everyone a framework for this. Everybody's always trying to wonder why they're not doing a behavior. why am I not working out today? Why am I not eating right today? Why am I not reading 30 minutes a day? Why am I not journaling or meditating, right? But they could use willpower and motivation, but it only gets you so far because there are other levels that they're not being addressed. Above the level of behavior is this level of capability. And this is your skill. I'm really big, I know you are, in skill development, because we don't necessarily rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our skills, right? Of our training, if you will. And so are you trained in reading faster or remembering names or working out? Because you need that training in order to do that behavior, right? But even if you have the training and the capability and the skill, look at the level above that. And that's the level of belief and values, meaning that, let's say the behavior is you want somebody to read 30 minutes a day, and they even have the ability because they were taught, but they have a belief like, they're not that smart, or they don't value reading. Or let's say in my case, remembering names, that's a behavior. I want to teach everyone to remember the names of everyone they meet. And maybe they even learn because they listen to a couple of podcasts on how to remember names, capability, but they have a belief it's not important, or they have a value that remembering names is not very important to them, or believe they have a bad memory, then it's not going to work, right? And you wonder why they don't do the behavior. And then finally, the level above belief and values is this level called identity. And this is something you and I talked about. Two most powerful words are I am. So let's say the behavior is you want somebody to stop smoking, but their identity is I am a smoker. That's going to be a hard shift, right? Because people are going to try to fight on the behavior every single time, 20 times, 100 times a day, but their identity hasn't shifted, right? And so let's say the behavior is, they want to stop procrastinating, but their identity is I am a procrastinator. That's a challenge. The last level,
Papers due tomorrow. I just got started, baby. I had 2 months.
Exactly. And you wonder why people put it off. And then the level below behavior, as everyone's thinking about behavior that they've been putting off, is this level called environment. And what I would say at a high level, let's say they want to, their behavior is they want to read more, but their environment is they have no books. Or maybe the environment is too dark. Or maybe they want to meet more people, but the environment, they're not putting themselves in an environment to meet new people. It's going to keep them there. Or maybe they want to stop smoking, it's the behavior, but their environment is around smokers, right? Or they're putting their environment, they want to eat good food, but their environment is they have all those crazy snacks.
They work at Chuck E. Cheese, like they're Chucky, like they're dressed up as a mouse.
And the reason why this work ultimately is because when we're talking about thinking is the process of asking questions and answering them. So, and even if people are listening, they're like, oh, is that true? Notice, is that true is a question. So the main questions back in school, watch this, are the 5 W's, right? The 5 W's and the H. So questions really are the answer, because that's what questions are. That's what thinking is. It's asking questions. The reason why an Elon Musk could come up with Tesla or something like that is he was outside the industry looking in, asked himself a new question. Why aren't we doing it this way with today's technology, right? That's what your power is, to be able to ask new questions. But going through the 5 W's and the H, the identity level answers the question of who. The level of beliefs and value answer the question why. The level of capability answers the question of how. The level of behavior answers the question of what. And the level of environment answers the question when and where. So it's tight. And what I'm all about is having congruency. The reason why it's not just about when people see me memorizing 100 people's names in an audience, or 100 words or numbers, or they know I read a book a day, is that there's a structure to this, because it's about, we use such a small percentage of our mental potential, right? But when it's completely aligned in your whole self, it's like whole self learning or whole self thinking. And then it becomes almost what appears to be effortless, to yourself, compared to like what people are struggling with. And part of it, again, is going back to this knowledge gap. Is there are some people who know, some people don't know. But I'm hoping during this conversation, the distinctions people learn, whether it's the 6 thinking hats or the O.L.D method about making mistakes and how to own it and learn from it and don't repeat it, or it comes down to like this framework, these 5 levels of transformation. It gives you these distinctions, so it allows you a new way of thinking about it. And because you're thinking about it different, you'll get different results. And isn't that what we all want?